Live free or die. Give me liberty or give me COVID. We want haircuts. Work will set you free. These are some of the phrases you might see or hear from the Reopen America protests. Some are steeped in American mythology, while others are petty and just downright foolish, while still others hide sinister plots. All of them, however, voice a frustration with the United States' COVID-19 response. They are particularly frustrated with social distancing guidelines, stay-at-home orders, having to wear face masks, and above all else, the economic struggles the pandemic has brought. None of this should be surprising to anyone with any familiarity with American culture. American culture is many things, but to be reductive, we could say that it is built off of an extreme notion of personal responsibility as the be-all, end-all of life, liberty, and happiness. It's clear that selfishness as a virtue and radical self-interest are both forces that are largely behind America's failure to combat the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. From everyday interactions wherein people inconsiderately go about their business as if there wasn't a deadly contagious disease going around, to large corporations who refuse to provide their employees with basic PPE or who refuse to shut down and so serve as hubs from which the virus can then spread. All of these dangerous and deadly actions and inactions can be sourced back to some notion of, hey, that's not my problem, that's somebody else's problem. Including, of course, the private medical industry, which put profits over preparation and people's health. Making money is their problem, people's health is not. Another phrase you might hear from these protests is, government mandating sick people stay home is quarantine. Government mandating healthy people stay home is tyranny. You can see this division between the healthy and the sick in other ideas expressed by this movement. For instance, the idea that only sick people should wear masks. If I'm healthy, why should I have to wear a mask? The answer, of course, being to stay healthy. The reason healthy people should stay home is so that the virus does not spread to them. The reason healthy people should stay home is because healthy people can carry the virus and spread it to others. The reason healthy people should stay home is because the virus can appear asymptomatic in many people. Without readily available and accessible testing for all people, it would be impossible to determine the healthy from the sick before it is too late and the virus spreads further. An inability and refusal to test as many people as possible has been one of the major failures of the United States' COVID-19 pandemic response, and that failure is largely in part because providing free and accessible testing is not a profitable thing to do. This pursuit of profit, even in times of crisis, is one of the main contributors to the 70,000 deaths in the United States. It is that same pursuit of profit that is behind these Reopen America protests. These protests are being staged, supported, and funded by billionaires. Billionaires who are concerned with the decrease in productivity stemming from stay-at-home orders. They are concerned with this decrease in productivity because they make their money by having other people do work for them and paying those workers only a small, tiny fraction of what the work was actually worth. With so many staying at home to avoid the pandemic, they are making less money off of the exploited working class. The wealthy are at a significantly lesser risk of contracting this disease, precisely because they are wealthy. They can afford to live in huge mansions and avoid mingling amongst us multitudes of workers. And even if they do end up catching the disease, they have access to medical support that the rest of us could never afford. The pandemic is not their problem. It is none of their concern so long as they can hide amongst all their riches. The riches they gained by exploiting the working class. So their problem is getting the working class back in the workplace so that the workers can keep building the riches for the rich. Enter astroturf. By paying people to organize protests and leveraging their ownership of mass media, the wealthy ruling class is able to sow discontent amongst the people by establishing fake grassroots movements and platforming those movements on every screen they can, which just so happens to be a lot of screens. Almost all of them. It would be easy to dismiss the Reopen America protests as being astroturfed and therefore not real, but that would ignore the fact that real people are occupying real physical spaces and making demands, often with the threat of violence not so subtly implied with the presence of firearms. To simply say, oh, they're astroturfed, And leave it at that would be a little naive. These protests will have an effect. They are having an effect, and in fact have had an effect. Over half of the states are reopening. This is despite the majority of Americans being opposed to this outcome, with polls suggesting that 66% of Americans are worried about the government reopening too soon, and 73% of Americans believing the worst of the pandemic is still yet to come. Democracy in action. This isn't even an example of Americans working against their own interests. What this is an example of Americans being forced back to work by the ruling class. Though, of the minority who are protesting against their own interests and health, protesting against their friends, family, neighbors, and coworkers, there still is some sympathy that can be expressed for their cause. Reading between the lines, we can understand what forces compel them to act in this way. America has no safety net. America has no food stability. America has no accessible health care. America has no economic relief whatsoever for people who cannot afford those things. In a time in which everyone should be staying at home and refraining from work, more and more people are finding themselves unable to protect themselves from oncoming poverty. Most Americans live paycheck to paycheck, and if the car breaks down, that's it. You're done. I can understand the dissatisfaction with stay-at-home orders and the frustrations with the economy being shut down from that perspective. America is a nation that has ordered its populace to stay at home while refusing to provide any support for those who have to stay at home. It's a situation where, yeah, you can go to work and maybe you'll catch COVID, or you can stay at home and definitely starve. Capitalism can enforce itself through desperation. You must work to live. It is not a choice. It is not voluntary. Without free food distribution, without free basic utilities, without a maybe universal basic income, the American people have no choice but to disobey stay-at-home orders. The American people have no choice but to get back to work. Such measures were previously considered antithetical to the American way of life. The American way of life of rugged individualism, of providing for yourself and only for yourself. Such a way of life is, and always has been, a way of death, only made more and more apparent with the advent of pandemic. Those who are falling for the billionaire-funded Reopen America protests aren't COVIDiots, or whatever bullshit insult some smug liberal wants to hurl. What they are doing is they are responding to not only America's failure to handle the pandemic, but America's very way of life by its design, to leave workers helpless and desperate, so that they may then be exploited by a rich ruling class. And let's be real here. As with all things in America, there is a huge racial aspect to all of this. Black communities are the ones being hit the hardest by this pandemic. Systemic racism is to blame. You can check out Sean Alika's video, White Supremacy and the Coronavirus, for more on that. I'm sure you've noticed that the vast majority of these protesters are white, and America is still heavily segregated. And since black communities are the ones being hit the hardest by this pandemic, you can expect that these protesters are probably still underestimating the virus because they haven't seen it yet. To them, this virus is something that is happening to other people somewhere else. It's not their problem. This failure of consciousness and this insistence on a highly individualized conception of the world will prevent any united or organized effort in America to combat this pandemic. Only by appreciating the interconnectedness of all people and all people's personal responsibility to each other can any effective strategy be implemented. It is the job of the left to educate the misguided and to reveal to the desperate their true power. It is the job of the left to organize the helpless so that they can help themselves and each other. These protests reveal yet again that there is a populace ready to organize, ready to amass, and ready to bear arms against their oppressors, but that they are being tricked into blaming scapegoats, and in doing so are working at the behest of the very boot that stomps on them. Fascism flourishes in the absence of a strong left. Just look at the liberal response. The liberal response was to face these protests with ridicule and demonization. The liberal response was to say, hey, look at all these people, they're gonna get sick. I hope they die, they deserve it. And I don't know about you, but biological warfare and social Darwinism seem like the things the baddies would want. Luckily, things are being done. There has been a surge in organizing efforts. You may not know about them because the capitalist-owned media is focusing on the capitalist-owned protests, but international companies like Amazon are facing a pressure from their workers they have never before witnessed. And rent strikes are a thing now. I certainly never heard of any before this whole thing went down, so cool. All I have to say about that is keep it up, keep building, and keep pushing for more. Check out genstrike.org if you're interested in keeping up with the genuine labor organizing. As for the talk of the town, the Reopen America protests, they are born out of the very core of American culture, the culture of the rugged individual. You are not expected to help anyone, and no one is expected to help you. Such a culture is very vulnerable to a pandemic. Such a culture is vulnerable to any disaster that affects everyone because it is unable to provide a collective response to the collective threat. Individualized personal responsibility only serves as a cover for all of the social ills that capitalism produces. This notion that you are doing good because you're good and other people are only doing bad because they're bad. Such a mindset is easy to hold on to when you are doing well personally and you want to attribute that success to your high moral character. But in reality, life just didn't shit on you yet. COVID-19 has no conception of your high moral character. Of the pursuit of happiness, can anyone truly be happy in the midst of an uncontrolled disease while still suffering from the ceaseless demands of capitalism? Of liberty, none can be expressed so long as death and destitution hang over the populace. Liberty cannot exist under capitalism, wherein a ruling class can dictate the lives of the working class, and do dictate they either go to work during a plague and die, or stay at home, starve, and die. Of life, 70,000 people have died from the failure to respond to this pandemic. That is not even to mention all the lives lost throughout the centuries of poverty and imperialism that capitalism has produced. Many people are saying that this pandemic will change America, that there is no going back to normal. But in actuality, the American response to this pandemic has been normal. This is the typical American response to a disaster. What we are experiencing is, to some degree, normal. These crises are a product of our culture and systems. They will keep happening again and again until our cultures and systems change. But they will not change on their own. They cannot be changed without making fierce demands and applied pressure. If there is any cure to our afflictions, that cure will involve radical changes to the American consciousness. I'd like to give a special thank you to my Patreon backer, an eternal Andarian citizen and diligent member of the Andarian Workers' Party, Josh Thomas. I'd also like to give a special thank you to Valium Sadfem McGirlboss, who advised me on the script. She even lent me this paragraph from a project she was working on. So please, go check out her latest video about state agents. And of course, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hey, maybe even support my Patreon. I'd appreciate it a lot. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and have a wonderful day.
Little touch up.
That'll be the after credits, you playing with my hair.
I'm not wearing pants.
God damn it, girl. Your pantsless attitude has foiled me again!
Sorry.